Most of you who have a GameCube have probably noticed that there are several ports on the bottom of the console. Most of these really never used for anything all that exciting. However, this one was. With it, you can use the Game Boy Player. So this is the Game Boy Player. Now, as you guys probably have guessed by now, this is an accessory, or rather an add-on, for the original GameCube that allows you to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games on your TV. So it's a pretty cool deal, and there's actually some really interesting things about this. But before we get anything, let me give you guys a quick little tour. Now, obviously, this is meant to be set underneath the GameCube. I'll show you guys how to do that in a second. But up front, you see just the little Game Boy logo, and there's a slot for a link cable where you can actually, just like the original Game Boy Advance, you could plug in link cable. In fact, this works exactly like a Game Boy Advance. So, you know, if I had another Game Boy Advance, I could plug it in here and trade or do whatever else I want to do with the link cable. Of course, I can take my games and just slot them right in. To eject them, there's a little button right here, so just kind of puts them out there. But one cool thing about this that a lot of accessories and whatnot don't do is the fact that this is the identical setup to the Game Boy Advance. So accessories and things such as the e-reader will fit in here perfectly. So as you can see here, lines up, allows it to plug in properly. One thing about this though is that this is actually basically a Game Boy Advance inside of here. So obviously there's no screen, but instead of relying on software emulation, which is well, it's less than perfect, this actually has pretty much the entire guts of a Game Boy Advance inside here. So, well, of course, and by extension, it also has the guts of a Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So you can play all the games and everything. It's going to run pretty much identical, and it all will be on your TV using the GameCube. Now, to install the GameCube is really simple. You just need to remove this door, and then just take the Game Boy Player, line it up. It's not too difficult, and then just simply press it down. Now, there are a couple of little thumb screws that you can tighten down here, which I'll do really quickly. And then you have the Game Boy Player on the GameCube. Now, by itself, the Game Boy Player really won't do anything. It needs the Game Boy Player disc, which comes with it. This disc is, you know, just as you would imagine, it's just the startup disc. It allows it to run all the software and everything. And this is important. If you're looking to pick one up, make sure it comes with the disc. Otherwise, the Game Boy Player is pretty much useless. And a lot of people lost these because they never really came in anything. They didn't have like a normal box or anything like that. So tons and tons of people lost these. So there are a lot more Game Boy players than discs. Gameplay on the Game Boy Player works really quite nicely. Now, since it is not software emulated, like I said, it actually has the original guts. It's going to run almost identically to the way it would work on a normal Game Boy Advance. It means nice, clear, really nice looking visuals. In fact, of course, the Game Boy Advance was really quite similar to the Super Nintendo, so those graphics look just about the same on a TV. Now, there are a couple of options when using the Game Boy Player on your TV. And of course, there is an option to slightly reduce the size of the image. So for some TVs, it looks a little bit distorted, a little bit unclear when you pull it up to the full resolution. So there's a normal mode, which gives it about 80% of your screen and does sharpen it up on quite a few TVs. So anyway, guys, that's it for my review of the Game Boy Player. Overall, it's a really solid accessory, and if you're a fan of Game Boy games, there's no reason for you not to pick these up. I mean, these days, these Game Boy players are so cheap, indeed, GameCubes in general are so super cheap. So you can probably pick the whole bundle up as long as you make sure that you do get the disc. Again, I can't stress how many people have lost the discs. It's absolutely insane. I mean, actually, in my local video game store, they sell the Game Boy players for just a few bucks, but the discs are like 20. So, yeah, you definitely have to pay attention to that. Make sure you get the disc. But if you're really a fan of the old Game Boys, this is absolutely a great way to play all your games using the Nintendo GameCube controller.